Welcome. You are watching episode 2 in the regional wrap series, Election 2022, Meet the Candidates. My name is Bill Bates, and joining me on this episode are the Informed Medical Options Party candidates, Silvia Mogorovich, who is contesting the seat of Leichhardt, and Peter Lambeth, who is seeking election in the Senate. Welcome, Silvia and Peter.
Thank you for having us, Bill.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Your party's been around for a while now. It's obviously grown over time. Last year, I interviewed Michael O'Neill, who's the party president, during the height of the COVID madness. And now you're contesting a federal election. I came across you during the state election in Queensland. So how long has IMOP been going, and what's its sort of reach now? And obviously the change in the Federal Electorate Act, increasing the size of the membership from 500 to 1,500, you obviously well and truly meet that criteria, else you might have trouble with this election. So just either Silvia or Peter, if you can just give us a bit of background on IMOP.
Well, IMOP started in 2016. Michael O'Neill is the president. He was also the founder, and he founded it in response to the no jab, no pay/play legislation brought in New South Wales. So we've contested 2 federal elections, state election, and some by-elections as well. We have about a membership base of about 6,000 or so. So when that new legislation came in, increasing the membership numbers from 500 to 1,500, we did have to, make sure we got them, but we got them all in. Our supporter base is very supportive, which is what you want in a small party. Our reach has grown from the state election in 2020, which my sister actually contested the seat for Cairns, and that's actually where her and I met Peter as well when he was with the Greens. And then we had probably on Facebook, or say combined social media reach of about maybe 25,000, and now we're at about 80,000. So that's a significant growth in the past 2 years.
So Peter, when did you get attracted to IMOP?
Well, actually, I've been attracted to IMOP ever since I started talking to the party, which would have been at the last state election in 2020. That's when I met Silvia and her sister, who was contesting the seat of Cairns in the state election. So I agree with the no mandate for no play, no jab, no pay concept. I'm opposed to that because that's just taking away a lot of people's independence in the raising of their children, and it especially impacts on people like myself, having a child with a disability who is ineligible or contraindicated to a lot of the vaccines because of the impact it could have on her health. And so it impacts directly on people like myself, as well as people who have a conscientious objection or and an informed consent. They oppose it just through an informed consent, whether is this vaccine beneficial or not to my child. So that's where I met the first representatives from IMOP that I came in contact with, which is Silvia and her sister. Since then, though, like at the time I was a member of the Greens, Queensland Greens, and since then the Greens have grown to be very much pro-mandate and take away the liberties of anyone who disagrees with the mandate policy, especially surrounding the COVID vaccine policies now. So I was actually a member of the delegate to State Council with the Greens, so in a lower leadership position within the Greens. In that position, I was not allowed to hold that position. I was expected to resign from that position if I was not vaccinated and did not promote the Chief Health Officer's vaccine mandates. So I wasn't comfortable with doing that. So that's why I wasn't comfortable doing that, because it was, to me, that's against democracy. So if I'm participating in a political party, I should have the right to my informed consent to whether to be vaccinated or not, and not be disendorsed basically from the party if I don't comply with the vaccine mandate within the party. So even going to a Greens event, I was not allowed to attend a Greens event if I was not vaccinated, even though they would be talking to the public, who a lot of them wouldn't be vaccinated. So to me, I was muzzled within the party just on that issue. And IMOP do have a lot of varying policies, and a lot of them do align very closely with my policy from the Greens, such as mostly the social justice side of it. So supporting social justice and issues such as that, as well as refugee issues and clean food, clean water, clean air, those sorts of policies, investigating fracking, that sort of thing. So a lot of the policies are very well tuned to my philosophies. The main reason I've come across to IMOP though is because they definitely do believe in democracy and the right to have varying opinions within a political party, which I wasn't getting from the Greens.
I think one thing, IMOP also a member of a group of smaller parties, or it has an affiliation with other smaller parties, and that comes out of, I think it's basically founded in South Australia, and I think there's the Federation Party, Seniors Party, and a number of other parties that have got.
Are you talking about CADCO, Bill? Are you talking about CADCO? Are you talking about CADCO, the Commonwealth Australian Democratic Cooperative?
No, I think it starts with an F. But there's a number of other smaller parties that are sort of trying to work together, including the Federation Party, Senior Party, and things like that. So there is now an attempt to sort of get those parties to sort of cooperate a little bit more together. And that's probably a good thing. I mean, but it still allows them their differences. That's right. Without sort of getting closed down or that. So I think that's important to all our freedoms. But Peter, well, your impingement was just in regards to the Greens, but gee, for a lot of the population, it was a whole impingement on their life, their jobs, the way they went about their daily routines, interaction even with their children and things like that. So, and what they could and couldn't do in regards to sending their children to school or playgroup, and then sort of also getting on to have those facilities so they could actually go to work as well.
Oh, very much so. It even impacts a great deal more than that, because my wife worked as a support worker with disabilities, people with disabilities, and the impact it's had on people with disabilities is significant. The management of the COVID pandemic for the last couple of years. So the rhetoric around coming from the major parties and the Greens has been that they're putting in these measures like the lockdowns and the mandates to protect the vulnerable and protect the elderly. And what it's done really is disendorse those groups. So the elderly have had no say in what's occurring to them. So if they're in an aged care home, which I have friends that are in aged care homes, and they have been locked in their rooms for weeks and weeks on end, not even allowed to see wives or family, friends, anybody, because they've been locked in there. My wife lost her job as a support worker, and those people that she was supporting, a couple of them have rung her in tears saying, can you come back and help me, because you're the only one that understands my condition and how best to work together to get them through the day, that sort of thing. And because of the vaccine mandate, that's been just not allowed at all. So the people that, and also those people, including my daughter actually, who's on NDIS, they have lost hours because of the mandates that have come in. So if you have to be vaccinated to be a support worker, or even to work in the office for a disability support organisation. So even if you have no contact whatsoever, with the participant in NDIS, if you're in the back office, you're still required to be vaccinated to work in that industry. So those people have been dismissed. So that's people out of administration that can't administrate, they've lost staff to administer the plans. They've lost staff face-to-face with the participants, so your support worker themselves. And so my daughter has lost hours from that. And many people have lost hours because the amount of staff that left the industry because of the mandate is significant, particularly here in the north. In Cairns here, I think like over the state, I think it was around 10% staff left the industry because of the mandate. I think it was here, it's closer to 20. So it's a significant impact on an industry. So you're right with what you said. It impacts on a lot of life choices in industry, but it impacts mostly on the ones that we're supposed to be, or we've been told we're supposed to be protecting the most, which is the elderly, which I've just looked up the incidents today. So in New South Wales last week, up until the 16th of April, there were 83 deaths in New South Wales for the week from or associated with COVID, COVID-related illness. 43 of them occurred in aged care homes. So the ones we're supposed to be protecting are not being protected. If more than 50% of the casualties are still occurring in aged care homes, we haven't done our due diligence to protect those people, and we certainly haven't protected the ones with disabilities. So it's spread right across society. You're correct with impacting on families. The amount of impact on families and family breakups that have occurred in Cairns is phenomenal, and that's a very significant impact on society as well as financially. Like I was talking to Tropical North Queensland. They've lost, in the tourism industry alone, in the Cairns region or the far north region here, which would include the Tableland up to Cape York, they've lost 9,000 jobs just there in one industry. So it's the impact has been immense, and the benefit I'm yet to see, because we're still having these high case numbers, etc. I'm yet to see a benefit from that.
Silvia, were you surprised how readily the government, that state and at all the state and federal government, so readily cancelled our freedoms during this pandemic without really any consultation or anything like that? And it looks like we won't see the actual documentation that sort of supposedly supported these mandates.
I mean, Bill, to be honest, I am not surprised that the government tried to put out this control grab. That does not surprise me. What really surprised me is the people, how the people just was like, they took it, they were like, they just wanted to do it. They wanted to do what the government told them. We've got decades and decades, if not centuries, of historical evidence showing that very rarely does a government work, without corruption and lies. And then as soon as they came out with these lockdowns and these mandates, the masks, the vaccines, everything, suddenly they could do no wrong. And I was really dismayed. The first mask mandate we had in Cairns, which was to do, I think it was the first or second, which was to do with a case down in Brisbane or nearabouts Brisbane. And then the statewide mask mandate, and 99% of the people walking around were wearing these masks, even though, geographically Melbourne is closer to Brisbane than Cairns. And I don't think it's very scientific to imagine that viruses, stop at borders. So for me, I was angry at the government. I was disgusted with the government, which is one of the reasons why I put myself forward as a candidate. But I wasn't surprised by the government. I was surprised by the people. And you're very right where you say where the science doesn't back it up, because there's science on both sides, really. And for me, what it comes down to is that at the end of the day, no government, no health official, no one can decide what I wear on my body, what I put into my body. That is my choice alone. So when we have a government, state, local, federal, whatever, And services like the police and everything like that enforcing these sort of mandates and directives, that to me is problematic, because I have read the Constitution a number of times now, and they need to be making laws that are for the people, to, you know, for our peace and for the benefit of the people. And I don't think any sort of medical mandates are for the good of the people. Imagine I'm allergic to peanuts, and you have a peanut butter sandwich, and then you say, Sylvia, have this peanut butter sandwich. And I say, no, it'll make me sick. You say, have it. Have the peanut butter sandwich. And I say, no, it'll make me sick. And you force it down my throat and I get sick. That is not right. Everybody has got a different physiology, and there's no mass medication that fits all people, and there never should be. And I personally, when people say we want to get our freedoms back, I also have a problem with that too, because I will never let anyone take my freedoms. I don't believe that the government's role is to, you know, have that control over us. So what I want to see is just them to be called out for what this is. I really support the Royal Commission that Pauline Hanson and some of the other politicians who are in power are putting forward. And I think we need to see that, because as you mentioned, I'll go back to probably the most famous one recently was in South Australia, where Senator Alex Antic asked the South Australian government for the science that determined the reason for these mandates. And all that they provided to him was minutes from a meeting. That's it, minutes from a meeting. So it's, yeah, it's just been absolutely gross overreach from the government in my mind.
Both of you and I are residents of Cairns, and we have an ongoing juvenile crime problem. We also have a high incidence of itinerant people drunk in the streets, assaulting people verbally, spitting on them, sleeping in the streets. And we can't do it. The powers that be can't seem to do anything about it. Yet, in this instance, both the state governments got the situation where they empowered the police to do almost anything, to go to people's homes if they were typing something on their Facebook page that disagreed with the general consensus. I mean, you had the example in Victoria very early on the piece where a pregnant woman was dragged out of home because she was on the Facebook page saying something. And does it sort of speak ill of the government when they can do one thing for one problem that sort of is maybe a health issue for a small percentage of the problem, but then something that affects the community so greatly in regards to car theft, crime, assault, and that in the streets, they seem powerless. It's inconsistent.
It truly is. Do you want to answer this, Peter? I've definitely got thoughts on it, that's for sure. I'll just say my little piece first. So yes. Just recently, I was told by a member of the community, she was working at a bar or pub down in, I think it was Edmonton or Gordon Vale. She said the police came around, and just before December 17th, before the mandates came out last year, that essentially segregated society, and the police came around and said that they put together a COVID response team, and if there's any problems with people not wearing masks or not checking in, that are called 000 emergency. She said she'd called them. There was someone being bashed up in the parking lot. An Indigenous couple were having a fight and someone was getting bashed up. She called them. The police didn't rock up for an hour. I was at a Stand in the Park meeting, and there was a woman who was jogging wearing a mask, and I just yelled out. I was like 30 meters away. I just went out, "You don't need a mask in the fresh air." And no joke, 10 minutes later, the police come and they're like, "Oh, you can't abuse people." And I'm like, what constitutes abuse, you know? So they came in 10 minutes for that. It wasn't, there were no bottles thrown. There was no physical violence. It was just a loudly stated opinion, and they were there like a flash. So there is so much inconsistency. And look, without getting too far into it, anyone who's got half a mind to look can see that the pharmaceutical industries have got their tentacles all over the shop. They are driving this push, so much so that actual real crime, and of all the things you mentioned, another one, we've got a really bad ice epidemic up here. That is just out of control. A few years ago, remember that baby picked up a rock or something from his mother who was dealing or something, and the baby died. Like, that's massive. No baby has died from COVID. Babies have died from being around drug addicts, and there's not much being done there. So the inconsistencies are really problematic in my mind. And we do, even though the crime is a state issue officially, I think it is a national issue as well. And up here, everyone who's got a voice should be speaking out about that, along with the housing, which causes it, because there's no actual band-aid solution. It's not, I don't actually think that just throwing kids in jail is going to solve any problems in the long run. They'll go into jail, learn how to be better criminals, and then come out, But if we apply some actual caring, community sort of solutions to this, providing purpose in people's lives, making sure everyone's got a safe and secure home. I don't know if you know this, but the Housing Commission waitlist in Cairns is an insane 10 years. 10 years, that's just unsustainable. That's got to change like quick smart. So whether the funds come from federal or state, we need to get onto that. Peter?
If I just move on to your constitution, and I had a quick read of it, and there's a lot of things in there that are sort of aligned with a lot of other parties and that. There's probably a little bit more in your objectives than some other parties, but then we'll sort of move on onto the policies. But I'll just show up the off your objectives from your constitution. All political parties have a constitution, and the main bulk of their philosophy or their core beliefs should be in the aims and objectives of the policy. I find that I don't find anything sort of overly I cringe about when I read it. Do you want to sort of go through a couple of them in regards to where it sets you apart?
I think we were definitely the first party to come in to promote informed choice for medications. That's definitely one of our core policies that we in our constitution there, that number one, to participate in that, or to be the first outspoken party to promote that. This point number two, the party is committed to repeal legislation that compels Australian children to be medicated against the will of the parents. That's a debate that we've already had 80 years ago in the Nuremberg Code, that every medication is voluntary informed consent. So although that's in our constitution there, that's very well adhered to framework that has been in place for the last 80 years, and it has served us really well for the last 80 years. And it's only been till 2020 that we lost that that right of medication against the person's will or against the parent's will for their child. So to me, they're two very straightforward things that are absolutely fundamental, and we were the first party to voice those publicly as part of our constitution.
One of the
notwithstanding that, I think over the years, actual parents' rights have been curtailed a fair bit. I mean, now the state basically can interfere or come between parents' desires in a lot of areas in regards to gender assignment, whether they even live in the same home, and that there's, since I think 1985, when the UN Rights Children's Convention came into effect, there's been a greater emphasis in parents and losing authority over their own children.
That's right. The government wants to have authority over all the people. Now, you did go away from that, but the last one for me is the most important one. It's about we stand, and this is one of the reasons why I joined the party in the first place, was because they stand for smaller government, less government overreach. We are overgoverned. We used to joke about Queensland being a nanny state, and now Australia has become a nanny state. There is no need. The amount of legislation that gets put through every year, thousands and thousands of bills, and how many have been repealed? It's over legislated and it's out of control in my mind.
I think a lot of parties actually have that in there about having a smaller government, but none of them actually abide by it. I think you'll find it in the National Party and in the Liberal Party thing about small government and personal responsibility and things like that. But the last thing they seem to be involved in is actually making the government smaller. I haven't seen the government under this federal government now, that's the coalition that's been in power since 2015. I don't think there's been any reduction in government. I think there's been just continually added more and more. I mean, Canberra is the fastest growing city in Australia. It's before the 2019 election, it actually went from 2 seats in the federal parliament to 3 seats because its population had grown so much, and it got more than 2 quotas, more than 2.5 quotas for a seat. So they now got 3 seats in the federal parliament. And at the rate they're going, it's a self-perpetuating industry. Between climate change and bureaucracy, it seems to be growing and growing and growing down there. So, and the thing is, the one thing you need to build empires is more legislation and more regulation.
I mean, not many empires from the past have continued, have they? Well, allegedly, not in the open anyway. But you touched on a word there that's really bureaucracy. The number of unelected bureaucrats down in Canberra who are, making things happen and, doing like puppet mastering is disgusting, honestly, disgusting. They're not elected and yet they're responsible for a lot of the stuff that's going through, really. And I met up with someone who's a current member of parliament, and they were saying it's really like that. The bureaucrats, they're there sometimes 20, 30 years they've been down there, and they're the ones who run the show. And I think that needs to stop.
I think that's important too, Bill. I'll give another example with the NDIS. The amount of money that NDIS is brilliant. It's a great concept, and it should be fully supported, and our party fully supports NDIS. But what we want to do is oversee the NDIS, because the amount of bureaucracy that is involved in the NDIS, a huge percentage of the money that's allocated to the participants who require this assistance is taken through bureaucratic oversee. So it's a lot of it is through incompetent management of the funds. So it's one of those things. It's just one example of where government has grown. Like NDIS has grown enormously since its inception, and it's really offering the participants now less benefit and less choice and control than they had at the beginning, because the bureaucracy has come into and it's gradually taking that choice and control away from the participant and back to where they want it to, which is the ever-growing bureaucracy. So that's one of the places we would investigate as to how to have smaller government and have it more meaningful to the people they're supposed to be representing, which is in this case the participant on NDIS.
I think it's like government schemes in regards to NDIS and then even childcare, that it seems to be geared towards big players for delivery of service. And I'm not overly familiar with the NDIS providers, but I have got a bit of an overview of childcare and the money that's actually being made by organisations and that in that category. and it's sort of horrendous. And the thing is, it all boils back. It's taxpayers' money, and we should be getting more value for money. And it seems like if there's a problem, let's not look at efficiencies or what's causing the problem. Let's just take more money off the taxpayers and put into the system. And that's wrong. I mean, you've got to get some value for the taxpayer, but it never seems to come into the equation, whether it's childcare, NDIS, or even education. I mean, education, maybe we can talk this, well, might go into your policies a little bit after this, but with education, there's no incentive to improve education, because as long as they can find fault with it, it's just a means of getting more money from the government. And they seem to be falling for it. We have innovations like teaching methods. We have less children in classroom. We have different types of classrooms and different types of learning. We have all these programs. Then we have all this higher education requirements for teachers. I mean, I don't care what anyone says. I think getting rid of the teachers' college, especially for primary school teachers, was a big failing. I think you now got people who go to university and they look around for what they're going to do, and they sort of can't really find it, so they decide to become a teacher. It wasn't part of their makeup in the first place. Whereas I think in the days of the teachers' colleges, people as young as, they just finished high school and that, but they have already had an idea that that's what they wanted to do, and they went basically straight from high school to, in Victoria, it was the Hawthorn Teachers College, which was a really great institution, and they do the training there for primary school. And yeah, if they wanted to become high school teachers, well, then that required university. But maybe we can just swing over and have a look at some of your policies now in regards to, because you've got an interesting one, I find, there for education.
Yeah.
I'll just share that screen.
Mm-hmm.
I might have to just go here.
A lot of people, while you're looking for that, a lot of people think of us as a one issue party, but I don't think that that's true at all. And we stand for healthier people, healthier environment, and healthier economy. It's across all of it.
It's just taking a little bit of time to load.
Technology.
Right, that's something now. Right, of course, we start off with vaccination. We'll just skip over that one. Well, here's an interesting one: parental policies. I find over the years, parents' authority has been gradually eroded to where they can't even keep a good close eye on their children's monitor their children's devices and like their internet use, their phone use, and things like that. Yet we have a real problem with cyberbullying, but it's the parents who are sort of responsible for providing the phones. I mean, no child basically can get a phone without a contract being signed by the parent and signed to them by a parent. So what do you see that there's problems with the deterioration of parental authority?
Absolutely. And apart from the ones that are listed, well, it's listed in here as well, with the government-funded natural and midwife-assisted births, the caesarean rate, which is meant to be an emergency operation, is now at something like 52% in Queensland. Like, they are not emergencies, they are planned caesareans. Why are we doing that? What's the benefit to the mother or the child? Or is it just the benefit to the doctor so that they can book it into their schedule and, not have to do it after hours? Parents should be the ultimate authority in their children's lives, and the government coming in to medicate the children, to decide, what the children can learn at school, that to me is really problematic. Because again, there's no one size fits all, and some children mature faster than others. So, you know, as you said earlier about the gender side of things, the fact that a child can't vote until they're 18, they can't drive a car until they're like 16 and a half or whatever it is. And, you know, now, it was a long time ago for me, but they can decide to, you know, get hormone blockers behind their parents' backs. That is really troubling. That is a permanent change to their biology. And it's just, it should be done in consultation with parents.
And I also think parents should have a say in it in regards to holding that. Yeah, the child obviously needs support, but there should be more of an effort to sort of, well, let's try to hold back as much as possible till you're more mature to make an informed decision. Because sometimes you wonder just how what influences a child has to get them into that position. And whereas if you go back into, well, my generation is a bit long in the tooth, but you know, that never came across anyone's mind or whatever. But I suppose with TV and access to the internet, all these things are they're exposed to. But again, it's still the parents who should have a good say on this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, then you've got the problem of child safety, and what happens in there is the fact that it's called child safety, and we hear of so many stories of, you know, children going into foster homes and being molested and abused. Like, it's a big mess. That's why I like our motto, I'm mopping up the mess, because we don't want to just put band-aid solutions. We want to get in there and you know, create real solutions. And that could be through parent education, through empowering the community groups, like support groups and stuff like that. There are ways to fix this, and the way that I see is government deciding more and more and taking more and more of a hand in matters is not the way forward.
I think also we're also faced these days with a lot more dysfunctional families in regards to with marriage breakups, so fairly prevalent. Households are under pressure all the time with having a stable household. You also have blended families now, so they would make another level of complication. And then you'd also have you've got households where there's not a father living there permanently, or doesn't, or has been had very little influence on that household. So it leads to a lot of problems. Do you think we need to sort of maybe look at maybe working out something where we sort of foster or encourage the family unit a little bit more than it's currently there? Because what it is now is it doesn't matter whether you're married or not. If you're broken up, the money is just allocated per child sort of thing, and it just goes in the bucket. Is there any way we can sort of just hopefully sort of make that bond of the family unit stronger?
Yeah, I think there's that's a big question, because the answer is multi-layered. So I think we're one of the richest countries in the world, yet we have one of the highest suicide rates. So something's not functioning correctly in society itself. So like there's a lot of pressures, especially with cost of housing, cost of living, that sort of thing. There's financial pressures that impact on the family, which then impacts on family violence and family cohesion. And that impacts again on what you were saying before regarding crime and youth crime and that sort of thing. The answer isn't necessarily in one area. The answer needs to be a holistic approach. So you're looking at answering why are people under financial stress in the first place? What can we do to modify the stresses financially on couples and families? What can we do to ease the burdens educationally? Because I've had students, like high school students doing their senior, they are seriously stressed individuals, and they shouldn't be. When we did our senior years ago, it was something you did and you got through, and then you went and got a job. It wasn't something that, oh, this is putting so much stress on me. So children are coming out of the education system, they're coming out of our society, the way it's been constructed at the moment, that there's all these pressures that are subliminal. They're in the background, but they're impacting on people's lives right at the coalface. So I think it's a whole structural issues. There's many layers of issues you need to resolve in the background to get that result that you want in the foreground of a more cohesive society, more cohesive family unit. So, and what you were saying before, just about putting more money into it, that doesn't work either. So it's about putting the money into the right areas. So you identify where you need to spend the money, and that's where you concentrate on where you're going to get the most benefit from it. But it's a holistic view that we need to take.
I think what I'm also getting at is that there doesn't seem to be any reward for people who do the right thing. We can have little Johnny and little Peter from different families and different backgrounds. Little Johnny has got a reasonable, stable household. He goes to school. He participates in the local sports club. He pays attention at school. He does everything right. He goes to high school. Still does everything within the community and sort of involved with the family. Goes to uni, does a course to get a good job. Comes out of there with a $50,000-$60,000 HEX bill, and meanwhile, little Peter over here. Peter's he's had a problem with his household and that. The government or agencies have pumped $50,000 a year into his care in regards to programs and whatever and that. He still doesn't pay attention at school. He's on the road to sort of menial employment or not having a great future or things like that. And we're going to keep pumping money into him forever and ever, or might even end up in incarcerating him or whatever. But to me, the expectation is for the taxpayers to put all this money there, but not sort of, well, where's the reward for being a good citizen and a good family unit? It's penalise them, take the taxes off them and give it to another. Well, and that's just a personal view, but and I think there's a limit to the taxpayer in regards to how much he's got to stump up for a lot of these individuals. You're talking about maybe 200,000 or 300,000 on a person per year for at least all their juvenile life.
I mean, look, not everyone is going to be a brain surgeon, are they? And I think, even I was in school, like I finished school in 96, and even back then there was less trades being offered in school. We still had some. What's it like now? Even less, There's not just, electrical and carpentry, there's hairdressing, there's all kinds of trades. And some people aren't into academic life. So why are they being pushed to, go all the way through grade 12, then go into I went to university, and in hindsight, I probably should have got a trade. It wasn't for me. Another thing, back in the day as well, university was free, and anyone in Australia who, worked hard and studied and wanted to could go to university. So it wasn't separated by, class or finances or anything. And I just think I think we are a rich country, but I think it's the distribution of where the money's going that is really the main problem. And I think that we could, make our way back to getting rid of the HEX debt. And because a lot of the times as well, you see people will finish university and then they'll go overseas. It's called the brain drain. So we pay for the whole education, from where to go, and they take all their knowledge overseas, and some of them don't come back. So
I think a lot of people would argue that we pinch more brains from overseas than we actually export. So there's an argument to and fro in regards to import and export of that. So, but the other thing is, as far as when I went to school, the thing is there were technical high schools, and people could branch out and go to a technical high school that was more woodwork, more metalwork, welding and things like that. I think over time what changed is they kept the academic side in that school, and they did an interface with TAFEs to get apprenticeships and trade knowledge, but it still required employers to pick up the apprenticeships and run with them. And I think what's happened over time is it's got to a situation where we've pushed up the cost of apprentice so high because their wages, I remember when I was apprentice, it was about $9 or $10 a week. And now employers are paying hundreds of dollars a week for someone who basically they've got to keep an eye on and supervise all the time for a number of years. So it is a big cost. And now we've got the situation where the government is now prepared for getting the taxpayer to pay half the wage bill for every apprentice. I mean, that's massive. You know, I don't know if we can sustain all this sort of money without business picking up more of the tab.
Yeah, I'm a tradesman, so I'm an electrician. So when we did our trade I did mine back in the 80s. So I wasn't on $9 a week. I was on, I think, 74. I started on. So
well, I started in the 60s.
Okay. So $74 a week, which was, I think, at the time 40% of a tradesman's wage. So, and I think that's how they geared it. So first year was 40%, second year was 60%, some of that. But every business had apprentices back then. So I was in the building trade. So the electrical company I worked for had apprentices. The plumbers had apprentices. The carpenters had apprentices. It was what you did back then in business. And what's changed since then, I think part of the issue is what you said before, this drain of people coming from overseas. So we've taken away the emphasis on requiring businesses or making it beneficial for a business to employ an apprentice and import that tradesman fully trained from overseas. That's a lot easier to do, just to import that skill. So to me, it's been an evolving thing. Even back then when I was going to TAFE, they were saying there's a shortage of tradesmen in this country. Okay, so that was, what are we talking, 40 years ago? There was a shortage of tradesmen being trained in this country, and it's only gotten worse every decade since then. So the resolution of that is getting back to a trade, like it's education. A whole lot of things come back to education. So if you have in the education system that it's not geared solely to go to university, but it is geared, if you're interested in becoming an electrician, you can do that from an early age at school and choose those subjects that will benefit you in that direction. So to me, it comes right back, you've got to go right back to basics in the education system and promote it as something worthwhile, because trades are worthwhile. Not everyone that goes to university gets out of university with a job. So it's quite the opposite of that. So it's, I think fixing a lot of the problems comes back to education. It should be free for everyone, so everyone's on the same keel, and it should be open to pursue the avenues that the individual is interested in, because that'll create the best work. And that in turn, if they've got the career that they're interested in, that in turn has more beneficials to society and the social cohesion and the crime and all the rest of it flows on. So that's what I'm talking about, holistic approaches. So education is a huge foundation aspect of that.
I think one of the other things is children today haven't really got a clear picture of what they want to do anyway. There's a lot more inputs than we had as children. It was quite simple for me. From my family background, I was going to just join the military, or was going to do an apprenticeship. A lot of people that I knew had pretty fair ideas of where they were going to go from a very young age. I'm talking about 10 or 12, you know. Friends of mine, their father was a chemist. That was his area. He was going to, and he ended up pursuing that. And in a good many cases, people actually pursued the courses they sort of decided to become a fireman or whatever. But these days, it's like they even get to university and they're still wandering around, unclear where they're going to go. So yeah. I think it's fairly problematic if we don't sort of provide these things at an earlier age at school to sort of give people, students, an overview of what's out there. Also give them an idea of what their capabilities are, honestly. Like, there's no point gilding the lily to say, well, you know, you should reach high academic standards, go to university, be a brain surgeon, when obviously their heart's not in that, and B, maybe it's a little bit beyond their capability, but you need to show them that they've got these other skills that sort of can, you know, like a plumber isn't on bad money these days if you can get one.
And Tyler's, they're killing it. And hairdressers.
So there's no, yeah. Well, so there's no real impingement on your earning power in a lot of cases. It's just being involved enough in the conversation to sort of start thinking about your direction at a reasonable age.
Yeah,
I'd agree. Those opportunities need to be put in front of people so that they can. No one's going to understand that. Oh, I could be an electrician if they've never been in contact with anything related to that subject at all in their schooling. So they're not going to. And by the time they're an adult, there's very few adult apprentices that are employed. So these decisions need to be made early, and you have to be put. The opportunities have to be put in play in front of these people so that they can understand that there is a possibility and this could be an enjoyable life choice to take.
I think the other thing is too, being associated with the regions and that, one of the big things that was around back in the 50s, 60s and into the 70s was the military Army, Navy and Air Force had apprentice schemes. And I joined the Air Force as an apprentice. But one of the things I noticed, although I was a city slicker top, as if you could call that, from Perth, which was still basically the outback in those days, as far as most people concerned. But the number of apprentices that came in from regional areas like Mount Isa, Julia Creek, Mackay, Wagga, you know, all across Australia, more than 75% of the makeup of our apprentice courses were from people from regions, because there wasn't that opportunity in the regional areas at those days, especially, like, there wasn't even universities in Cairns and things like that at that time. So basically, your children had to, even if they wanted higher education, they had to leave and go on board. And it's quite an expensive operation sort of thing, but gee, if you could shuffle them off to the military, they get bored and keeping a few bucks, and they get a trade after 6 years, and they can come back and be a great benefit to the local community, or move on and even open up their own business. So do you support things like that, initiatives to re-establish those sort of opportunities again?
Can I speak again, Silvia? Yeah.
Yeah, go for it. I do want to say one thing though, but I'll wait till you finished.
Yeah. When I worked as an electrical supervisor for a government department here a few years back, and we took on a trades assistant, and she was electrician from the Navy. And I said, "Oh, why don't you come here as a tradesperson, not a TA?" And she said, this is probably 8 or 9 years ago. She said her qualification, even though she's a fully qualified electrician for the Navy, that did not qualify on land. So her qualification ended when she stepped off that ship. So she could do ship to shore connections, any work on the ship she could do, but she couldn't do anything on the land. She had to recommence her apprenticeship. I think it was shortened. So instead of being 3.5, 4 year apprenticeship, I think it would have been two years for her. But she had to go back. If she wanted to be an electrician out of the Navy, she had to come back and do another 2 years as an apprentice again, and she wasn't prepared to do that. So that to me was just a huge disincentive for doing schemes like you just spoke about. That should have been at the most probably a 6 month changeover period where she learned that there's quite a bit of differences between how you wire a ship and how you wire a house or an apartment block, but they're not totally foreign to each other. There's a lot of overlap there. She should have been able to come off that ship, come work for us as a a short-term apprentice of 6 months and have that trade given awarded to her. So there's a lot of systemic things that have faltered over the years that have led to situations like that. Like, I don't know what the reason for that was. Maybe people were doing that and getting their trade in the armed forces and then leaving. Maybe this is to stop that. So maybe there's reasonings for it that I'm not aware of, but it's definitely a disincentive to the country to not have those skills being utilised within our country. So, Silvia.
I think even if someone had done like a 4-year stint in the Army or the Air Force or the Navy and then left, you know, if anything happened where there was, God forbid, a war or something, they haven't lost the skills they've learned. But one scheme that I really like the idea of is when kids are in high school, for them to go to a farm or, you know, any kind of farm and to live that for a month, 2 months or a term. So they have a better understanding of, you know, food wastage is really huge, as we all know. And I think that more we teach people, especially when they're children, like what goes into making this food, they have a high respect for it, and you know, you'd waste less. So you'd be waking up, you'd be doing all the different chores, you'd be watching, you know, the plants grow and, you know, go through, you know, the calves being born and all that sort of stuff. And you just get a fuller understanding, because as we've gone away from the self-sustainable lifestyle that our ancestors had to have through necessity, we're now coming to a very entitled and you know, pretty much almost disrespectful sort of mindset about that, you know. And I'm not saying that I'm a perfect person with this. I'll buy food sometimes and then I'll, you know, rot in my fridge and I'll get really upset about it because I've got an idea. But, you know, we've got to stop more. We've got to like teach kids more about stuff like that so they do have that understanding, you know.
Over the next few weeks, you'll obviously be invited or hopefully to different events. maybe.
And if not, we'll have something to say about it.
I don't expect you probably won't make it to advanced cans, meet the candidates or anything like that.
Well, we weren't invited. I would have gone if we'd been invited.
Yeah. Do you think there needs to be more public town hall meetings, you know, instead of these meetings where Advanced Cans has a come along, pay $80 and meet the candidates, you know, limited sort of conversation type. Do you think all the candidates should face up down the Cairns showground on a stage, open to public, free, get up there? If you don't get there, you get an empty seat with your face on it, you know, or something. And then give the people opportunity to ask a few. I mean, all these things get a bit heated sometimes, but with good moderators and a good mic being able to turn it on and off, you probably could have a reasonable event. That used to be fairly common, you know, maybe 20 years ago, but it seems to be becoming less common. Do you think there's a call, like people like Cairns Post should sponsor those sort of more public meetings rather than these closed house ones?
Well, funnily, you should mention the Cairns Post, because when they interviewed me at the election drill the other day, they said, what's been the biggest challenge of this campaign? I said, getting attention from the mainstream media. It's almost impossible. When Advanced Cairns and Tropical Tourism TNQ and the Cairns Chamber of Commerce sent out their invitation, even put up their event online, it says meet the 5 candidates contesting the election. And even then, when they did it, we knew that there were already 9 candidates contesting it, and now there's of course 11. And I'd go even further than that, not just for elections. I like the idea of having a town hall for whoever becomes the member of parliament once a month, once every 2 months. We do that same thing, and the representative gets up on stage, and the people in, you know, in the region who are concerned can ask the hard questions then. And you know what? In this age of technology, it could be done over a Zoom like this. Member could be there and they could get the questions from the people, and it's a way to stay in contact. I mean, I've written to Warren Inch a couple of times, and once, you know, you write the letter, the email, and then it comes back and says, well, you know, tell me your postcode and address so I know if it's worth writing to you or not. It's why can't he just read the emails? Why can't his staff just read the emails and respond, even if it's someone outside the electorate? I just don't understand that type of thinking, really. But yes, town halls would be amazing. MPs are meant to represent us. Senators are meant to represent the best interests of the citizens of the state in Parliament. And I think I can say for Peter and I, and most of the IMOP and all of the IMOP people are not seeing that, which is why we're running. Sorry, Peter, do you want to say something?
Oh, no, absolutely. Like, it's so important for our representatives to know what the people are thinking. And if they're not, if they're sitting in their back office or sitting in an office in Canberra, not even coming out to view a protest if it's there or not, then that's an issue. And what we need to have in our whole political system is approachability to our politicians. So otherwise the whole thing is not democratic. I have no idea until I talk to a group what the real issue is with this. I might have an idea, but it might not be accurate at all as to what the real issue that they're concerned with is. So unless you have that continual contact and that face-to-face contact, even if it is over Zoom, you still need that face-to-face interaction with the public to understand what the public are really concerned about and what they need changed in their lives or what can benefit them. So absolutely, I would endorse that. Yes.
Yeah, it's really.
One of the other thing is that's interesting is you're contesting the federal election, and unfortunately, because of our education system doesn't seem to teach our children and then even the adults the difference between the federal and state responsibilities, the responsibilities and powers of the Commonwealth versus the states. We now have a situation where federal candidates go to the electorate and they start talking, oh, we'll get you $3 million to a company so they can anchor a boat or a mooring out on the reef, and gives them a $3 million advantage. Or they get talk to a club and they'll say, we'll get you $500,000 for a new change room and whatever. Or we'll look at sort of fixing your local water supply. Those things are not the Commonwealth's responsibility. Those things are the state's responsibility. Your federal responsibility is the defence, immigration, biosecurity, trade, and it's a fairly actually narrow field. But we have the whole system basically being corrupted and allowed to pork barreling. So how do you go to this election not being caught in that situation where you got to get called in to talk about, you know, these sort of small local issues that are definitely state issues compared to the things that you've got to address in the Commonwealth Parliament?
Well, that's a really good point. And sorry, Peter. And education, you're right, is not there. In 4 Medical Options, so we actually put together an election guide, which our candidates have been going around and showing to constituents. And it does delineate, you've got, you know, your local government, what their responsibilities are, what your state responsibilities are, and what your federal responsibilities are. It has gotten a bit mixed up in recent years because there's been it seems to be a lot of federal funding for state issues. So I think that has, you know, gotten people even more confused about what federal parliament does. I personally think that if it's an Australian person's issue, then in some way or another, it comes under the banner of, you know, a Commonwealth issue. Even if it really should be a local issue, then I want to be the one to say, well, here, I'll write to Brett Olds or whoever the councillor is in their area, and, you know, that's their issue, and let's work this out. Work on behalf of the Australian people, you know, and get that education back into schools. Like, so many people don't know how preferences work, don't know how, you know, the system works at all. And I was like that too. I had to inform myself. I was in 3 months, you know, going over all of the processes and how it all worked and who was responsible for what. And one thing with knowledge like that is it can never be taken from me. Now I know how it works. And part of what I see my role is, even elected or not, is to pass that information on to others. So, you know, now and in future, they can make informed decisions.
I think it's made more difficult by the fact that businesses are sort of tuned in to how to get money out of the Commonwealth and into areas that they really shouldn't be involved in. So
very true.
It's not that some people don't know. It's they know where the bucket of money is, and that's where they put their emphasis to sort of get the flow. Going to this election, when you meet the people and that, what are the prime things you talk about, Peter?
For me lately, it's been the NDIS actually, and well, I'd say that plus also jobs. We hear a lot from the two major parties and the Greens about jobs and how they're going to create jobs. What I hear when I talk to the people is how they've lost their job. So over the last 2 years, so that's the big impact here. So 2 weeks ago, I was in Gladstone and then Hervey Bay, Townsville and here, and right across that east coast that I travelled on doing campaigning, the big thing was jobs and job security, that has been taken away from them, and that's what they need to enhance their life, is to get their jobs back and to get job security back. And just with the wastage of money too. So with the NDIS I mentioned earlier, as well as the lockdowns and that sort of thing, the amount of money that the Cairns region has lost. So when I was talking to Tropical North Queensland, they gave me some figures, and they said this region here that they look after, which would be the Tablelands, Cairns and up to Torres Strait, they've lost $5.3 billion in business that has been lost because of the lockdowns and the mandates. So, and what the federal government comes with is a $15 million package to bring that back to normal. So they're the issues that are impacting me, is the jobs that have been lost in the last couple of years, and the job security that's also been lost over probably decades now, job security, and wastage of money. So they would be the big things, and they're all recoverable. They're all you need is a government structure and people in government that want those things rectified. And if you point your head in that direction, you can rectify those issues. So you don't have government overreach, you don't have government wastage, you control those sorts of things with legitimate things. And you look back at the thing of giving people choice and control. So whether that's someone with a disability or someone in mainstream endeavours, if the people have choice and control over their lives, everything goes a lot better. So if you steer government in that direction, that's what I'm hearing. That's what they want. That's what they need, and that's where we'll be trying to strive towards.
Okay, Silvia, your electorates are one of the largest electorates.
Yeah,
I mean, there's some
huge.
vigor, of course, but and you got a very diverse population, all the way up to the Torres Straits. That's got its own sort of problems and idiosyncrasies. And then we've got a fairly big Indigenous population in far north Queensland, your electorate. There's a lot of different characters to try to satisfy. So what sort of things are you going to concentrate on in this election to talk to the bulk of the people, and also, of course, being able to handle the individual aspirations of different groups?
Absolutely. That's really important, I think, as well. Look, the first part of your question, I would say, regardless of cultural background, race, or anything like that, at the end of the day, humans have basic needs like shelter, purpose, food, and things like that. So for me, especially when they're the crux. That's what I want to make sure. If everyone in our region, even Australia, to be completely optimistic, if everyone in our region had a safe place to sleep, access to education, clean water, reasonably priced food, because as we know that some people might not know, but when you go out to the communities and stuff like that, the food choices and prices out there are unbelievable. Like what we would pay like $5 for here, they're paying, $50 for out there. And it's that needs to, change quick, smart, because it's not fair. I am all about fairness. I want everyone to have a fair go to life. And I know that sounds quite naive, but I think that it's possible. We are a really rich country and we do have the resources to make that happen for people. So firstly, it would be just ensuring that everybody has basic human needs met. And then up from that, the individual aspirations, to make sure that there's opportunities for people to, pursue their dreams. whether that is, starting a business, starting a family, whether it's, higher education, that they can do all that in the region. I am a big proponent. I think we need way more manufacturing in Australia, and especially up here. It really saddens me to see so much of our produce leave the area, get packaged down south, and then get sold back to us. I just think that if we could do that more up here, and it is possible. You look at success stories like Mungali Creek Dairy, they're doing it all up here themselves, and they've got a great product, and it's a viable business. So I think that we need to invest more in more manufacturing up here. When people have their basic needs met and the opportunity to pursue their individual paths in life, that makes for a pretty happy person. You've got purpose, you've got community around you, and generally it makes you happier. And I just think that we all deserve that, really.
Okay, we've well and truly done the hour.
Yeah.
If we could just wrap up now, because what I'll do, I'll take an opportunity to talk to other candidates in your party at a later date, so they can add on to the conversation. We might talk about energy, the barrier reef, the things that actually going to be brought up in the Commonwealth Parliament. So if we could just finish up now, and then just if you'd like to just finish up on your keynotes going into the election.
I just think we're about accountability and trust, and that's what's missing. And the overreach of the current governments, Labor and Liberal, the overreach on the population and the control that they're inflicting on people. So what we need is a more. I'll go back to what I said before about the choice and control. So if we can communicate, as you said, with the face-to-face activities with the population and the constituents, and give them choice and control, that will lead to the best outcome for this country, because each individual has something to offer, and we should be listening to those people, each individual, and following their pathway. And that's what we should be doing as in IMOP. That's what we should be doing to facilitate that.
Okay, Silvia?
Well, essentially, I wanted to run in this election because I think that people, especially in this region, need representation in Canberra, rather than having the Canberra dictate what happens up here. I mean, even from us up here, even to southeast Queensland, it's a completely different world, really. It's very, very different. And I am very much a fan and supporter of FNQ. I think we've got it all up here, and there's no reason why we shouldn't have a stronger say in Commonwealth politics, in the Parliament, and make sure that we're looking after our own before, looking after Canberra and their interests and the corporate interests that push some politicians rather than the interest of their constituents.
Okay, then. Look, thanks very much, Peter and Silvia. I'll leave it to you, Silvia, to talk to your other candidates and feed them into a time and a schedule that they can meet in regards to having an interview. And if they have a look at your interview, they can maybe look at items that they want to continue on in more specific policies. That would be really great. Again, thanks very much. I hope you enjoyed your time here.
That's great.
This will be uploaded, and I'll send you the links in the next couple of days. But if you just stay on there, I'll just wind up now. If you enjoyed our show, please like, subscribe, and follow our Facebook page, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We hope to do another episode very shortly in this series of Election 2022, Meet the Candidates. Join me again then. Thank you.